I would like to say sorry. Sorry to the victims and survivors and all those affected by child sexual exploitation in Telford. While there were no findings of corruption, our actions fell far short of the help and protection you should have had from us. It was unacceptable. We let you down.
I really appreciate you joining me today, and this story comes from Telford. This is an update to a story that I covered before. Most people may remember that I did a story about Tommy Robinson going to Telford and the documentary that he was doing about corruption and the police not investigating cases that were happening for over 30 years. It has taken several years for the inquiry to be concluded, and this week we finally got some sort of summary on the failings that occurred in Telford. And even though the men that were mainly responsible for these cases have been jailed many years ago, this has still left a stigma on the local area, and it has also had a massive contributing factor to racial tensions as well, where local communities feel that because the police had ignored the fact that the vast majority of abusers were from the Pakistani community, this has actually caused more conflict and has led to years of animosity. West Mercia Police have came out today and apologised wholeheartedly after the inquiry said that they didn't do their job properly and the bare minimum would have actually stopped a lot of the abuse from occurring. Firstly, we're going to react to the Times newspaper and their coverage of the story, and then we're also going to go to West Mercia Police to listen to their statement. The Times newspaper said that more than 1,000 children were sexually exploited over a 30-year period in Telford, and this was amid shocking police and council failings. Unnecessary suffering and child deaths may have been avoided by West Mercia Police if they had done the most basic job, according to the findings that were published yesterday. The inquiry found that child sexual exploitation thrived for decades in the Shropshire town, and in part of the fears that investigations into Asian men would inflame racial tensions. Children were brainwashed for years by men who brought them alcohol and cigarettes in what was described as a lover boy method to exploit them and to abuse them. Tom Crofer, the inquiry chairman, said, "The overwhelming theme of the evidence has been appalling. Generations of children suffering, and it has been caused by the utter cruelty of those who committed the exploitation." Victims and survivors repeatedly told the inquiry that when they were children, adult men worked to gain their trust before ruthlessly betraying that trust and treating them as sexual objects or commodities. Countless children were sexually assaulted and also raped, and they were deliberately humiliated and degraded, and they were shared and trafficked with other men. They were subject to violence and their families were also threatened. They lived in fear and their lives were forever changed. The 3-year investigation by the independent inquiry into Telford's child exploitation found that more than 1,000 children were subject to the abuse over the decades. Witness evidence suggested that West Mercia Police dropped the case like a hot potato if the complaints were made against Asian families, because investigating them would be too politically incorrect. Young girls were targeted by men who would meet them on the street, and they were taxi and food delivery drivers, and they persuaded them to become their girlfriends. The men would then start giving their children lifts, buying them fast food, alcohol and cigarettes, and topping up their mobile phones to convince the girls they was in a loving relationship. The inquiry heard that a lot of this took place in various licensed premises in the area, and the children were pimped out and taken to rooms within the premises where they were exploited. The chairman of the inquiry said one of the most shocking pieces of evidence was one where they described it as a rape house, and it had become clear that this had been operating for years, and girls were taken back there and abused, and their families were threatened. In one of the cases that I covered in previous episode, it was the case of Lucy Lowe, who died alongside her mother, sister and unborn child in August 2000. She had been impregnated by Azhar Ali Mahmood, who was a taxi driver, and he was jailed for the murders of Lucy and also her mother. They said exploitation was not investigated because of nervousness around race, and information was not properly shared with other agencies, and the inquiries that involved teachers and youth workers were discouraged from reporting the child abuse. In total, 7 men were jailed in 2013 following Operation Chalice, the police investigation into child prostitution in Telford. And in 2019, one of the 7 prosecuted earlier was jailed with 3 other men for abusing a girl. And as I said at the beginning, West Mercia Police have came out today in a statement and said that they apologise unequivocally to the victims and survivors of the child sexual abuse. They say they are devastated to find that there were significant failings by West Mercia Police in the way they handled the child sexual exploitation. Chief Constable Richard Cooper said, "I would like to say sorry to the survivors and those that were affected by the exploitation in Telford. There was no findings of corruption with the police, but we fell short of what we was meant to do to protect them, and this is unacceptable. We let you down, and it's important to reflect on this and also to make sure it doesn't happen again." So this story has taken over a decade for it to come out and all of the actual mistakes that have happened to be revealed, and also in some way to try to find closure for the people in the local community, because people are angry, people are upset, people feel betrayed and let down, and these are all feelings that they should have because that was the reality. And for many years there was told that this wasn't the case, that they were believing in conspiracies or something that isn't true. So I really want to hear what people have to say on this story, and don't forget to check out the previous coverage on the Telford grooming gangs and send your stories to news@Scarcity Studios, and they will always be looked into and taken with the most seriousness. Don't forget to follow online as well at Scarcity Studios on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter and Facebook, and I'll be back again very shortly with some more news. Peace.
I would like to say sorry. Sorry to the victims and survivors and all those affected by child sexual exploitation in Telford. While there were no findings of corruption, our actions fell far short of the help and protection you should have had from us. It was unacceptable. We let you down. It's important we now take time to reflect critically and carefully on the content of the report and the recommendations that have been made. Whilst we are in a different place now, there are no excuses for the past. What I can give you are assurances that we have made vast improvements to the way we tackle these crimes, but we cannot and will not stop there. We're absolutely committed to continually looking to improve our approach. We now have teams dedicated to preventing and tackling child exploitation. We also have an online child sexual exploitation team to ensure that we are targeting offenders both online and in person. The officers in these teams work incredibly hard, day in, day out, to actively root out perpetrators and put them before the courts, as well as preventing offending. The way we work with other agencies has evolved, and we now work better together so that we can act quickly to safeguard children at risk of being targeted and prevent harm whenever we can. When the worst does happen and a child is harmed, or if someone reaches out about an offence that happened some time ago, we have specially trained officers who understand the complex and sensitive nature of these issues and can ensure the right and necessary support is there. Some years ago, we introduced exploitation and vulnerability trainers, delivering training to those in jobs and roles that may be able to spot the signs of offences, such as council workers, teachers, hotel staff and taxi drivers, and this has been invaluable. We want people who are, or think they are, being exploited or are concerned about child sexual exploitation to report this to us. We will listen and we will act on any information